Hello, this is Eric Killinger with Capgemini. I am going to present a case study for a client project that is just completing for one of our utility clients in Canada named Hydro One. Hydro One is a very large utility, so their objective is to to distribute electricity for their utility clients across the Ontario province, specifically between Toronto and Hudson Bay. They have last year about $6 billion in Canadian revenue and over 8,500 skilled employees. And they served over 1.4 million residential business and industrial customers. I wanted you to understand who the client is because as they are very well established and very critical to their industry and utility, they are going through a very disruptive time in providing their services. So as you can imagine, being a large company, being so instrumental to their client base, they cannot have downtime. They have to provide great visibility to the products that they're offering, both to their internal employees, to their partners, to their clients that they're serving, but they also have to manage cost. So performing, the historic, uh, service of utility delivery is very challenging in today's market. You have to be safe, you have to be secure, and then ultimately you have to optimize that service going forward because every person, every tool that you add to the delivery costs money. So as Hydro One looked at their ability to manage the change, the disruption in the market, they had some decisions that they had to make. So their current IT estate is managed by Capgemini. So in the history of our management, there is over 15 years. We have been managing IT application business process. The infrastructure was managed very well. It's very well optimized, highly interdependently understood what the intricacies are. So the challenge though was with the actual technology itself, which is owned by Hydro One. So they had challenges with the agility and the flexibility of just the underlying technology that their product offering was built on. Additionally, they had project initiation and resource cost challenges. So with legacy applications, with legacy IT architecture, you have legacy knowledge. And so the resources were, again, very professional, very well managed, and very skilled in their areas. But it did cause a lot of challenging changes when it would come to go-to-market changes. And that included project initiation costs, timing, and challenges with just capacity management due to the age of the infrastructure. And the infrastructure, especially the core applications that we'll talk about later, are based on Unix platforms, AIX and HPUX specifically. So with the aging IT assets, they did incur a higher recurring operating cost than if they had a more modernized x86 platform, based on Intel or AMD products. So over the previous couple of years prior to when the project started in 2018, there was a lot of discussion around paving the way for the future. So the future needed to have agility, needed to have operational excellence. It needed to have an improvement in the processes that were being used by the people, the tools, the automation. And then ultimately, we needed to get a handle on the capital expenditure investments that were historically made year over year, as in any IT organization, needed to try to rein that in. And again, trying to reduce the legacy IT costs based on legacy Unix platforms, higher operating cost models, we could improve both operating model costs and also reduce capital expenditures by using less proprietary technologies. So there were three key areas that the client and Capgemini really focused on in order to provide the future state transformation as we were trying to solve this challenge together. So in the beginning, before the beginning of the project, it was determined that the IT process and visibility needed to improve. Hydro One wanted to have a clearer picture of what their IT infrastructure was and how its performance affects the business operations. So again, being a 15-year client, we already worked very well together. That wasn't the challenge. They wanted better insight into, okay, this is working, but how can we maybe do it a little different way? How can we offer different services to our clients, to our business users, and how can we make sure that we can keep eyes on this so that we can continue to transform and continue to live in a continual innovation and development cycle, as opposed to doing very blocky, very challenging transformations years over year. Next, the IT and process costs needed to be reined in. So again, it was not out of control, but as within every IT operating organization, you have to always reduce your costs where you can. So we're trying to meet their objectives, and this is partially from the government and the regulatory agencies in Ontario. They needed to lower rates for customers because it was something that was mandated by the Ontario Energy Board. So in order to do that, there had to be numerous cuts across the business. Just IT had to take out their share of the cost. And then lastly, customer service. The only thing that customers remember is their last contact with a customer service agent, with a tool, with an app, with an invoice. So that's all they remember. So the goal is to offer exceptional service at the best value in a couple of areas. One was for the internal services for business functions. So for the internal users themselves, so IT function provided internal to their their thousands of resources. And then secondly, an initiative was undertaken to reach out to the clients and provide automated discovery, automated measurements for utility consumption. In order to do that, they needed to basically change many of their services. They had to have a higher reliability in their applications, their data discovery, their networking, their security. So across the board, there was quite a lot of transformation going on. Ultimately, that comes down to customer service. So the agents that take a call that are getting an incoming call from a client saying, I have a question about my bill, that needs to be something that can be presented in a seamless fashion to the client so that it's really a one-stop shop, one phone call, one answer. We don't want the client to have to call back numerous times. We don't want the agent to have to reach back to the client. So providing a great customer service experience for the client was key to the project outcome. Now we'll switch gears and we'll talk about specifically what were we going to be doing for the client. Based on Capgemini's history of transformation projects across the globe, we really wanted to make sure that we were providing a standard offering with minor customization as required to provide a good experience that the client would really appreciate, they would adopt, they would prioritize their resources to work on, and that they would see value coming back to them in very measurable ways. So the project was broken up into really three significant phases, and this only is talking about we're getting up to the final recommendation. This is moving up to the design phase and justification of implementing the project. So I want to spend some time on this slide to help you understand what the initiatives were. So again, being that we were already the managed service provider for the application and the infrastructure, the discovery portion of this really was just an exercise in validation. We know the systems, we know the applications, we know the resources managing it, we know the users, we know the criticality of the systems, and we know the service levels that are required. So in that discovery phase, it is a culmination of knowledge that we had, and then it was putting it into a context that we could use to feed it into the rationalization phase. So that rationalizing phase is part of the beginning of the why, right? So we present it to the client, to both the business leaders, the technology leaders, and even up to the board through our client partners, why we were doing this. What is the business problem that we were trying to solve? So through the total cost of ownership, through the value statements, through the benchmarking against other utility entities specifically, we were able to note that here is exactly what your investment in people time is, what your investment in cost is, what we expect to be able to transform or to change during this project, and this sets the foundation. So now, with the investments understood, with the migration high-level plans documented, and then rationalizing whether we keep or modify or retire certain portions of the IT infrastructure, now the plan starts to come together. And this is important to the client because based on our contract with them, we're able to both modify, increase or decrease our footprint and our services. Ideally, the goal is to decrease, right? So we're looking to decrease legacy infrastructure, decrease our reliance on human capital, and increase our ability to transform. So in the design phase, then the next couple of weeks, this is formalizing what was sold. So we spent, again, more than a year and a half, I think it was close to 2 years, in the full design or the full sales process. And just due to multiple factors that it took that long, but once it was actually sold, we had a fairly good design already put in place. We understood the technologies, we understood the investments in the infrastructure, licensing, any partnerships that needed to be established to execute on the scope. And then finally, we were able to put in the design phase, put it to paper, right? So now this is where everything comes together. Final decisions are documented, approvals are made on the design, reference architectures are updated, and now we're ready to go. Now, in the last two sub-phases within the recommend, the plan and the justify, we're calling these iterative phases because this was a long, multifaceted transformation project. There were applications to change, infrastructure to change, data to change, people organizationally needed to be reskilled. So within that plan and justify, there are future stack technologies that have to be laid in. So you had to build up the foundation and then make some organizational management changes, how we operated. And then you build up the next layer, and then you build up the next layer. Each one of those iterations then comes back to a justification period to show that, hey, what have we done here? And what is the impact on what we thought was going to be done in the rationalize phase? Are we now compatible with what we were thinking? So it gives us incremental reviews of what we said we were going to do. We're going to do it, and then we're going to assess what we did. So it makes sense from the client's perspective to have small measurements so that we can make incremental changes if we need to, if we're not seeing what is being expected. So ultimately, the end of the project is the culmination of the final justification. But at that point, the investments are made, the applications are transformed, it's all in. But we've had many, many, many minor justifications along the way. Now, when the client and Capgemini and our partners all put our heads together, we decided that based on the security requirements, so there's numerous cybersecurity policies that were changing for PII and for data protection, that we decided to go to a private cloud that was being built in co-located data centers, but its reference architecture is based on VMware validated reference architectures. So we spent quite a lot of time in this phase in the pre-sales to make sure that whatever we were doing was fully supportable by all of the key technology vendors that are part of the solution. And we'll show you that in a little bit. So out of the vendor validated reference architectures, we knew that we needed to have blueprinting, and blueprinting is where you're developing standards for servers, for technologies, for applications, and you're making these like a golden image. So then that is blueprinted and provided for a marketplace selection in a store, if you will, to provision in the future so that you can make minor changes to your architecture, you can deploy new services, but it's in a secure and robust and reliable manner. Building on blueprinting, then the automation, self-healing, and auto provisioning all tie together. Now, these are tools, these are techniques, these are systems that work together through knowing what is the state of normal, what is outside of that state of normal, and then what can we automate to provide both self-healing, auto-scaling if required based on capacity, and then any other automation like log clearing for databases, any number of things could be included here. So that was a big part of the reference design. Now, as we mentioned before, reducing the time and cost to deploy the infrastructure and applications, this is quite a significant undertaking. Based on the legacy application architecture, the way it was operating before, and the operating systems, IT systems, specifically the AIX and HPUX systems, any new project that would be commissioned would take several months to implement. And there was typically a capacity allocation for this, so there's cost to that. There was people time to clone data, to scrub data. There was servers to be built, databases to be built. It's just a very manual, very intensive and costly initiative. So the goal was to reduce the time to provision project environments and also to reduce cost. Next, the cross-skilling and upskilling of valued employees. Capgemini and Hydra One have a unique, I don't know what you call it, just a terrific value provided to their resources that they had very little turnover. They had terrific retention in employees, and because of that, you have some of the most talented resources within their skill set. But as we move forward into this data center of the future, we needed to take those terrifically skilled resources in their area of expertise, and we needed to upskill and cross-skill them into other areas, because the technology that's being deployed is a hyper-converged technology, which we'll show you some of the tools in just a little bit. So there was a good level of effort put in by Capgemini and our partner to assess the current skills of the team members and make recommendations and then implement training plans to bring them to the level required to support the new architecture. And then the new streamlined and simplified service delivery model, this kind of relates back to the step above, the cross-skilling. Based on the new architecture, now we can do more with fewer strategic resources because they can see a broader swatch across the environment. So now instead of a traditional, just a server virtualization resource, you may have some networking, some security, some data skills involved there. So the organization now is going to be simplified and leverage the new infrastructure. And the last two here really kind of go together and they relate to the first bullet. So the vendor validated reference architecture, when you look at the last two bullets, we chose a composable infrastructure to improve the operational capabilities. And a composable infrastructure is basically it's a modular, scalable infrastructure that is meant to grow over time to allow you to add components to increase your technology utilization, but it's done in a way such that the operations are seamless, the tool sets, integrations are seamless. So we will talk about the vendor that was chosen for that. Then lastly, the money is made through SAP environment, right? That's what it comes down to. That is the back-end solution. They had, I think, 7 different environments live there. They needed to have a flexible and much more cost-effective environment. So we were going to re-platform the SAP environment off of AIX and HPUX Unix and move them to a Linux-based x86 environment that would be virtualized and hosted on the private architecture. So now a little bit about some of the partnerships. So over the 2-year sales process, there were numerous different iterations of what partnerships we should be looking at. And what we settled on is a leading edge solution, right? So if you look at the 2 blocks, right? The upper block is all VMware, and it incorporates some known technologies like vCenter, SRM for disaster recovery, but then it includes newer technologies, the VMware's NSX networking technology. This has been on the market for a number of years, but it's really become emergent now to be very solution oriented and competitive with other virtualized networking platforms. And then on the right, the vRealize platform for automation, operations, and network insight, they're also foundational to this because the automation and operations work very seamlessly together, and you could even say orchestration in this layer because you put those together and now you've developed the blueprints, you've optimized your operations, you've automated processes, and at the network layer, you're given visibility into security for microsegmentation, which we did implement, and for consistency so that we have protection zones that are built up to secure databases, for example, and storage, which was part of the cyber initiatives to cordon off any data, any user data, to protect that going forward. And then now looking under the bar, this is where we were talking about the composable architecture. The HP Synergy platform was one of several different vendors that we looked at, and we jointly selected HP Synergy as the solution for this project because of the single pane of glass to look at the storage. We use 3PAR for storage, HP Store Once for backup and some recovery snapshotting. And then the HP Synergy blades itself give you that composable infrastructure, integrating the backbone architecture, the blade centers, the centralized management and alerting. So all of that comes together to give you that composable infrastructure to build the virtualized platform on top of. Now with VMware, VMware's validated design, the reference architecture, when you look at the core technology stacks that Hydra One utilized to deliver their core offering, their energy delivery and measurement and billing systems. If you go left to right here, SAP is their core backbone. So the self-servicing and provisioning that was required to automate and to reduce operating expenses wasn't available, right, through the legacy Unix environment and the HP Superdomes. So one of the main concerns here was to implement a platform that could help with automated provisioning and management of software-defined data center assets, right? So it could be the servers, the databases, the data for storage, security zones, all of that. Now move to the right. The Oracle databases are, of course, key to storing their data, right? So they already had a great solution with Oracle and with SAP integrated together on the Unix platforms. Now we just needed to, re-platform those over to the Linux operating system and implement secure network zones or microsegmentation. So the Oracle databases were core to the design architecture was core here because we were moving away from some HP proprietary technology to have high availability for Oracle and implementing that in the virtualized Linux environment on VMware. So putting those together, the SAP and the Oracle stacks, that is essentially the core offering of most of what is required to do business within the utility space. Now, lastly, of course, Microsoft is key. I could add in there Linux as well for other systems, but the Microsoft stack was the other one that needed to have a lot of blueprinting done so that we could simplify the provisioning process, right? So blueprinting the databases, blueprinting the application servers, blueprinting any of the middleware servers, all of that can come from VMware through the automation, orchestration, and operations layers. So put all that together, now you can have isolated management zones. So moving down to the middle layer, looking at the management zones, you can secure off all the management applications from your non-production and your production work domains. And this is done through NSX, VMware NSX. Now you've got virtualization for management on the left side. You've got non-production, very scalable work domains down the middle. It can be repeatable times n. And then as you progress through the lifecycle progressions, you move that over to the production workload domains, and now you're able to progress and promote your environments within a completely virtualized VMware platform. Now, this is just a little snapshot on the VMware's vRealize automation service catalog. So one of the objectives was to create a marketplace for both developers, for architects, for operations resources to understand, hey, what are my standard offerings? What can I use as building blocks as we're putting together our next iteration or our modification of what we're doing today? We wanted to give them just blueprints to choose from. So is it an app, a middleware app? Is it a web app? Is it a database application? Any number of things, and these are just examples listed here. These are not specific, but it gives them the ability to add specific, already pre-approved, blueprinted services in a design architecture, in a secure design architecture, at the point of just a simple request. So you click on the request button, you put in the requested variable parameters, and it submits it through the approval workflow. Now, depending on what is being requested, it could be an automated provisioning, just going through the workflow, gets the appropriate workflows, and it's automated provisioning. Or if it required a bit more manual touch, at least the framework is there for the blueprinting. So now just the variables with some people interaction that has to be engaged can be put into place. But it gives them the ability to pick from the App Store experience, and it gives them the flexibility to choose only what they are permitted to choose. So I'll give you an example. A database administrator may need to spin up more database servers to handle workloads for seasonal needs. A database administrator may not be able to ask for web services. They may not be able to ask for any kind of security segmentation changes. So in this environment, they're going to just see their database services only, and the rest of these fields would not even be presented to them. So they won't be trying to request something that is outside of their ability. So now, what does that help us with in reclamation? One of the things that IT always struggles with is reclaiming system resources. When you're in, whether you're in a dev environment or you're in a prod environment that's been decommissioned, typically speaking, unless you have a very mature offering where you're looking at capacity planning and management on a very proactive basis, things just don't get reclaimed, right? So building out this modular x86 environment on the HP Synergy, now we're going to be able to be very consistent in our ability to identify idle resources, run some notification processes against that to the owners, and then, after a period of time, if there's no response or a positive response, to go ahead and reclaim it. We can go through an automated reclamation process. And again, just automating this for the reasons to minimize people time. Now, once that's been automated or been reclaimed, gets put back into the reclaim pool for available resources. Now you can reuse that again. So imagine that, an organization of Hydra One size, imagine that in another company that might have multinational system requirements across different zones or regions. And you're really talking about a lot of resources that can be reclaimed, right-sized, retired. It can help with application lifecycle management, so that there's really no question about the components that are left out there. You know that if it's out there, it's needed, because you can run these automations daily. You can run them weekly to identify these patterns and reclaim the resources. Now, who were the benefactors of some of these automation changes, the consolidation, the replatforming, and modernization? Well, imagine everybody, right? Everybody listed here. Right? Finance gets improved visibility into their data. HR has the human capital management perspective that's more streamlined. Supply chain management and field services and customer services absolutely benefited from this, because supply chain is really about collecting this new set of data from the field. Field services is all about capacity management. Now they get more endpoint notifications, and customer service, because they're able to know, very proactively what's going on with customer accounts and within any of the utility distribution space. If there's issues, they're able to be much more well informed. So we talked about the resources needing to be reskilled. Here's some of the real drivers behind this. So organizational change management, some may be a little shy about talking about this topic, but it's a really important topic, because as I'm out meeting with customers and we're talking about new technologies, you can see that a resource that's been around for 15, 20 years and is an expert in their field may have some concerns about, maybe I'm a little specialized in a certain area. But the benefit to a client that has a long tenured workforce and is willing to look at change is they can now elevate their resources into enhancement positions, so that they can take that long period of knowledge and expertise that they've built up, and they can start looking forward. They can put that into projects. They can put it into, hey, here's where we know requirements come through that we need to standardize our offerings around blueprints. Seasonal workflows, for example, it increases peaks in utilization. We can automate low-level tasks, server provisioning, for example. You can automate that. You can automate database log file purging. So all these things that used to take people time can now be automated. So you're enhancing your resources' ability to do higher skilled and more interesting work. And then, for and I list this as onshore and right shore. For this solution, we had all onshore resources initially, but you can look at this as your original retained resources versus your newly organized or your newly changed organization. But the last bullet in the onshore resources, optimizing post-deployment environment, this is really what we were trying to get to, right? We wanted to retire legacy debt. We want to be scalable and be able to look forward to the future. And we wanted to give them an environment that was scalable so that they could continue to add on to it as required and be agile enough to meet the business's changing needs. So then the right shoring resource, and again, you could call this freshers, you could call this less skilled resources. This is the category of resource now that because you've enhanced your long tenured resources to drive enhancements, now you can bring in less costly resources to work on, just maintaining, keeping the lights on, right? Some of the minor enhancements and patching, move add changes, lower skilled resource expectations, but you get it at the right price. Now, what did this project end up with in an organizational change? So initially 100% onshore sustainment and project teams. And when you looked at what their their people responsibilities were, they tried to maintain about 15% for project execution in each of the resources. So 85% towards production, operations support, 15% towards innovation and projects. So it was working, right? But they didn't really have enough time to put into innovation and industrialization. So it was kind of keeping the lights on and providing new features, but based on legacy architecture and skills. So moving into this next framework where we've got the composable infrastructure based on HPE Synergy and VMware, now we're able to reskill the people, provide more innovation, provide more of an emphasis on the tenured resources that have a lot of ideas. Now we can give them more time to work on that. And then we can put the projects onto those people. So now they can really move forward and they can be engaged more of the time. Then you move towards the right-hand side of this. So that's your enhanced resources, your elevated resources, and your right shore or your freshers, your juniors. These are the people that are just kind of keeping the lights on and doing lower skilled resources. It gives them a career path as well. So now the right shore people can move from becoming, just machine builders. So over their progression of time, so they become very familiar with the infrastructure, the interdependencies, the applications, the nuances of how to do business. Now they move from that lower skilled area of machine building and less automated into more of a productive, innovative partner. You can lower the lower the operating cost while supporting higher business demand. So this is both from the people side and also from the infrastructure and the applications. So now Hydra One's value starts to go up. Their shareholder experience is more rich, right? And the advisory board that's saying, hey, lower the cost. Well, now you are lowering the cost. You're taking your portion of the costs out. Now everybody in the company needs to contribute to that, but at least IT is saying, yep, we did our part, and now we're agile enough to move forward. So eliminating inefficiencies and reducing lifecycle development, key to innovation, right? So you can't perpetuate problems just because they're there and then continue to build on them and just say, well, sorry, that's just how we've done it. You have to get rid of those. So paving the foundation for a cloud-based scalable environment, again, starting with this generation being a private cloud, as they progress through the maturity of adopting more of an agile development lifecycle, now they can start moving this, if they consider they wanted to move it into a public or a hybrid environment. Gives them the cost predictability that they need, because now adding x86 is a commodity. Right now, it's not about adding large footprints of customized, specialized mid-range systems. We already talked about coworker productivity and career excitement, right? So now as I've reskilled these long tenured people and I give less tenured people the opportunity to progress in their career, now they're becoming much more excited and they can see a career progression instead of saying, okay, this is my 8th year in this particular tower. I've done everything I can do. I'm not that excited anymore. But now they can see that the technology path for them is varied. They can start to move in new directions and gain additional training and insight as their experience within the company grows. And then lastly, in this values section, leveraging the projects as a service. This is really a core component to where they needed to get to. They were doing projects already, but they needed to do this as a service. They needed the initiation to not take months. They needed to get the technical roadblocks out of the way. So by going to a hyper-converged, very modular x86 platform based on Linux, and replatforming their legacy code into this new modern code, now they can provide projects as a service, and it doesn't take 6 figures to initiate a project. You can do it in days, not months. So, some of the other solution benefits, we've talked about this. This is really important I put it into the 6-block section here so that you can see really jump out at you. For simplified operations, you have to automate, right? That's what it's all about. How do you automate this? It's through tools, techniques, and processes. So moving down, enhanced security. There was quite a lot of discussion around this. And as you can imagine, in the utility environment, the utility industry, segmentation of security and NIST policies and so on, these are all being pushed very hard by the industry to secure the data because we live in today's world, right? People are always trying to get through the edge security perimeters that we have in place, get down to the data and take it or modify it. So it's up to us to try to provide a secure environment, and we did this through micro-segmentation. So we put in there policies that only allow the froms and the tos that are allowed to talk to each other. Everything else, explicit deny, right? So this gives them a much better secure foot to stand on. The flexible choice, right? So again, qualified hardware vendor selection. This is a validated design architecture, gives them the flexibility to plug in OEM vendors of their choosing. And then as they want to move to public cloud, now they've been enabled because they've been put onto a modern x86 and Linux platform with modern operating systems, modern databases, and the interdependencies between everything is very well known. So now they can scale with flexibility where they want to go. Consistent experience, again, this is something that we wanted to make sure that they had so that I guess it wasn't a crutch for people to say, well, during this time of day, it doesn't seem to be operating right. We wanted them to have a consistent experience, consistent tools, consistent across private and public clouds. Now they can choose where they want to go to. It doesn't matter, you make the choice. Enterprise class compute storage networking, this was just a must. That's the foundation. We chose industry leaders in this area, specifically VMware with NSX for securing the environment for the network. But you could look at any of the high class, other OEMs that are hyper-converged out there and make a good business case for them as well. We chose HPE Synergy and VMware for the solution. And then of course, financial predictability. Retirement of the legacy systems was debated for quite a long time, right? Because there was a larger investment to do that, build up the x86 platform, but then so that's a capital expense. But then over time, that operational expense becomes much more predictable than maintaining a legacy and possibly end of life system as those were coming up. So in conclusion, I will say that the Hydra One, as they moved into this, IT infrastructure for the cloud. And in this iteration, it was a private cloud. We were tasked to make sure that organizational changes in both people, processes, and technologies were something that was going to meet the objectives that were set out in the beginning. And they did. So I've been doing this for 21 years. And I will say that being part of the sales process right at the end back in 2017 into 2018, and then overseeing it as the delivery executive, it made a lot of, I'll say I got a lot of joy out of seeing it. Now, of course, it wasn't easy. You know, this is replatforming and tearing things out. So it was certainly not easy, but we made the process manageable because of the results. The client had to get results, and we could prove to them, and I've been in contact with numerous people since this has been implemented, the operating costs have come down. The expectation is that the target of 15% operating cost reduction has been achieved year over year. And now that the investment has been made, now they can support higher business demand for agility and for different innovation. I mean, again, being in the utility space, they won't change. They won't stop changing, I'm sorry. They will continue to innovate, continue to require additional security, and they will probably move into more of a public cloud base. So as the security is, I guess, trusted in public cloud, and that's emerging now, you can move to more of a cost-based scalability and cost predictability in that environment. You already have it today in the VMware validated design and the HPE design, but you could move towards that cloud predictability. And then finally, you know, the increased employee productivity and career excitement, it just builds on the excitement that, you know, the industry is having. So leveraging what is out there in the industry and the continual change and incorporating that into your IT operations team will continue to provide opportunities for them to plug in, provide value, continue to be excited about their career and opportunities, and look forward to the next innovation cycle, or even better, the continued innovation cycle that has been provided. So that is the case study for Hydra One's data center of the future. My name's Eric Killinger, and I want to thank you for listening in today.